My name is Margaret Wilson. I'm 67 years old, and what I'm about to share changed not just my life, but exposed a truth that no one saw coming. Now you look your age, better late than never. Those words were scrawled on a pink sticky note stuck to my bathroom mirror when I woke up on my son Thomas's wedding day. I reached up to brush aside my usual silver bob and felt nothing but smooth skin. My scalp tingled with the remnants of whatever had been used to remove every strand of my hair. The bathroom smelled of chemicals, and small tufts of silver hair still dotted the sink. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I walked calmly to my office, unlocked the bottom drawer of my desk, and removed the envelope containing documents for the transfer of our family hardware store, worth $1.8 million to Thomas and his bride-to-be, Vanessa. I placed the envelope in my safe instead of my purse where I'd planned to carry it to the wedding. When I looked in the mirror again, the woman staring back wasn't the respected owner of Wilson's Hardware, the business I'd built from a small shop into a regional chain with 6 locations across the state. She was someone who had been deliberately humiliated, made vulnerable on what should have been one of the happiest days of her life. What Vanessa didn't realize when she violated my dignity was that 57 wedding guests would soon witness a truth that would change everything. Thomas wasn't always under Vanessa's influence. Growing up, he was thoughtful and kind. Every Sunday after church, we'd work together at our original store location, him stocking shelves while I handled the register. He'd memorize inventory numbers just to impress me, his small face lighting up when I'd praise his diligence. "Mom, when I grow up, I want a store just like yours," he told me at 12, carefully arranging paint samples by color. "But I'll always help with yours first." Our favorite tradition was camping each summer at Lake Winnipesaukee. Thomas would help set up the tent, insisting he could hammer in the stakes himself, even when his small arms could barely lift the mallet. At night, we'd roast marshmallows and talk about the future. "You're the strongest person I know," he said, the summer after his father died. "Dad would be so proud of you keeping the store going." He hugged me then, his adolescent frame still small enough to tuck under my chin. When Thomas graduated from business school, he gave a speech thanking me. "Everything I know about hard work and integrity, I learned from watching my mom build a business while raising me alone." Those memories felt distant now, replaced by 3 years of watching my son slowly change under Vanessa's subtle manipulations. When my husband Paul died suddenly of a stroke 15 years ago, I was left with a 22-year-old son, a mortgage, and our struggling hardware store, with more debt than profit. I promised myself Thomas would finish college without loans, and our family business would survive. I remortgaged our home for $175,000 to keep the store afloat during the recession. For 3 years, I worked from 5 a.m. until 9 p.m., 7 days a week. I cut my own salary to $18,000 annually, barely enough to cover basic needs. When the basement flooded, I slept on a cot in the store office rather than pay for home repairs. When Thomas needed $32,000 for his final year of college, I sold my wedding ring and the antique car Paul had been restoring. "I'll pay you back someday, Mom," Thomas promised, his eyes sincere. After graduation, Thomas wanted to start his own business consulting firm. I took out a $65,000 business loan using our store as collateral to help him launch. It failed within 18 months. "It's just a setback," I assured him, absorbing the debt myself. 2 years ago, when Thomas announced his engagement to Vanessa, I paid $28,000 for their elaborate engagement party, at Vanessa's insistence. 6 months later, I covered their $45,000 down payment on a condo because Vanessa said their apartment was too small to properly entertain. Last year, when Thomas lost his job, I supported them with $2,200 monthly for 8 months. It's temporary, Mom, Thomas assured me, while Vanessa continued her shopping sprees. For the wedding, I spent $52,000, nearly all my savings. 2 weeks before the ceremony, Vanessa mentioned offhandedly that she'd found the perfect starter house and hoped Thomas and I could work something out financially. I nodded, already calculating which store location I might need to sell. In total, I'd provided over $350,000 in direct financial support to Thomas since his father died, not counting the business I planned to sign over after the wedding. The changes in Thomas were subtle at first. 3 months after meeting Vanessa, he missed our weekly Sunday dinner for the first time in years. Vanessa thinks I should diversify my connections, he explained vaguely. At Christmas, Thomas arrived 3 hours late to our family gathering. Vanessa complained about my outdated decorations and questioned why I still lived in such a modest house given my business success. When I mentioned expanding the store, she asked, "At your age, shouldn't you be thinking about retirement plans?" During a family barbecue, I overheard Vanessa telling her friends, "Thomas's mom is so traditional. She doesn't understand how modern businesses operate." Thomas stood silently beside her, offering no defense. My sister Janet noticed too. "Have you seen how Thomas checks his phone for Vanessa's approval before answering any question?" she asked me. "That girl has him on a tight leash." My store manager, Robert, who'd known Thomas since childhood, commented, "Thomas seems different now. Last week he came in asking about the property value of the main store location. Said he was just curious." Thomas began questioning my business decisions. "Vanessa thinks you should sell the original store location. The land value alone could fund your retirement." When I explained my attachment to our flagship store, he sighed. "Mom, you need to think practically. Vanessa has a degree in finance." Last month, Vanessa accidentally left a browser tab open on my computer showing nursing homes. When I mentioned it, Thomas said, "We're just exploring options for your future. You can't run the stores forever." At the rehearsal dinner, Thomas barely spoke to me. When I asked if everything was okay, he whispered, "Vanessa thinks you're trying to steal attention from her this weekend." I retreated to my table, watching my son become a stranger before my eyes. The manipulation became clear the day Thomas and Vanessa asked to meet me to discuss something important. They arrived with a folder of documents. "Mom, Vanessa and I have been talking," Thomas began nervously. "We think it would make sense to add both our names to your business accounts for emergency purposes." Vanessa quickly added, "It's just practical, Margaret. If something happened to you, Thomas should have immediate access. And since we'll be family..." She smiled, sliding papers toward me. I noticed they'd already filled out most of the forms. One document wasn't just for account access. It was partial ownership transfer. 2 weeks later, they suggested I sell my house. "It's too big for one person," Vanessa insisted. "We found a nice senior apartment complex nearby. You could invest the house money in our future," Thomas added. "Vanessa's thinking of starting her own business." They began scheduling financial planning meetings that always seemed to involve signing something. When I hesitated on one document, Thomas looked hurt. "Don't you trust me, Mom?" The "you" started showing up unannounced when my medication made me drowsy. "Just a few signatures," Vanessa would say, holding papers while Thomas distracted me with questions about my health. My longtime accountant, David, called with concerns. "Margaret, someone's been inquiring about changing the ownership structure of your business," using Thomas's email, but doesn't sound like him. They began isolating me from others. When my sister planned to visit, Thomas suddenly needed emergency help the same weekend. When I mentioned my bridge club, Vanessa commented, Those old ladies probably just want your money, too. My store managers reported Thomas and Vanessa visiting all locations, asking detailed questions about revenue, property values, and my retirement plans. The final attempt came 3 days before the wedding. They arrived with a notary and legal papers. "It's just updates to your will," Thomas explained casually, "making things easier." I pretended to feel ill and asked them to leave the papers for review. After they left, I discovered it was a power of attorney document giving Thomas and Vanessa control over all my affairs. That night, I called my lawyer, Stephen Green, who had been my friend for 30 years. "They're trying to take everything, Stephen," I said shakily. "My own son." Stephen reviewed all the documents they'd tried to get me to sign. "This is elder financial abuse, Margaret," he said gravely. "We need to protect you and your assets immediately." The morning before the wedding, I was searching for a misplaced earring in Thomas's old bedroom when I found a leather portfolio hidden behind his bookshelf. Inside was a detailed plan titled Wilson Assets Acquisition Strategy in Vanessa's handwriting. Attached were printouts of my bank statements, property assessments of all store locations, and a draft sales agreement for the business, already filled out with a buyer's information. My hands shaking, I took photos of everything with my phone. I then called my sister Janet, who came over immediately. "Look at this," I showed her the documents. "They're planning to take everything and put me in a home." Janet's face hardened as she read. "There's more," she said, pointing to another folder. Inside was a prenuptial agreement between Thomas and Vanessa that specified business assets acquired from family would remain solely Vanessa's property in case of divorce. "She's been orchestrating this whole thing," I whispered. I also found emails between Vanessa and someone named Craig Parker, the buyer listed on the draft sales agreement. One message from Vanessa stated, "Once we secure ownership, we can proceed with the sale. Margaret doesn't need to know until it's done." As we read further, we discovered Vanessa had a history of similar situations. There were news clippings about an elderly professor who had gifted Vanessa substantial assets before passing away under questionable circumstances. Most disturbing was a detailed calendar marked with my medication schedule and notes about when I was most agreeable and mentally fuzzy. "We need to call Stephen right away," Janet insisted, already dialing our lawyer. After reviewing everything, Stephen said grimly, "This is criminal. Elder abuse, fraud, possibly conspiracy. I'm contacting the district attorney's office." That night, I barely slept, the weight of betrayal crushing my chest. My own son, the boy I'd sacrificed everything for, was complicit in a plan to strip me of everything, orchestrated by the woman he was about to marry. The next morning, wedding day, I called Stephen again. "I need to secure proof that can't be denied," I told him. Stephen arrived with Robert, my store manager, and my accountant David. Together we formulated a plan. David brought copies of all recent financial inquiries made by Thomas and Vanessa, including their requests for business valuation reports and property assessments. They requested this information claiming to be authorized representatives, David explained, showing me forged authorization letters with poor imitations of my signature. Robert had saved text messages from Thomas, asking detailed questions about store operations, cash handling procedures, and when I typically reviewed financial reports. "He said you had asked him to gather this information, but it didn't sound right," Robert explained. Stephen carefully documented everything, taking photographs and preparing affidavits. He also brought a small recording device. "Margaret, Massachusetts is a two-party consent state for recording," he warned, "but given the evidence of criminal activity, We can present this to the district attorney. Just be aware it may not be admissible in court without their consent. I nodded, understanding the risk. I need the truth recorded in their own words. We also discovered that Vanessa had begun contacting my suppliers, introducing herself as the incoming owner of Wilson's Hardware. 3 vendors called me confused about the ownership change, Robert said. She's already acting like she owns the business. Janet arrived with a locksmith who changed all the locks on my house and provided new keys only to me and Janet. My bank manager confirmed attempts to access my accounts using personal information that only Thomas would know. They were persistent, she said, claimed to be helping you with financial management. By noon, we had compiled a file of evidence so substantial that Stephen said, "This is beyond civil court. This is criminal conspiracy." As I prepared for the wedding, my hair gone but my resolve intact, I placed the small recording device in my purse and the evidence file in Stephen's car. "Are you sure you want to go through with confronting them today?" Janet asked gently. "Their wedding day is when they expected to complete their plan," I replied. "It's fitting that it's when their plan falls apart instead." The past months had seen increasingly bold mistreatment from Vanessa, with Thomas either participating or standing silently by. At Thanksgiving dinner with extended family, Vanessa accidentally spilled cranberry sauce on my favorite blouse, then loudly commented, "With your business success, Margaret, you can certainly afford new clothes. This one was rather dated anyway." During Christmas, Thomas and Vanessa arrived 4 hours late, missing the family dinner entirely. When I expressed disappointment, Vanessa snapped, "You can't expect everyone to revolve around your schedule. Thomas has other priorities now." When I was hospitalized briefly with pneumonia, they visited once for 15 minutes. Vanessa spent the entire time on her phone, while Thomas awkwardly stood by the door. 3 days later, they called asking if I could co-sign for a new luxury car. At a family gathering, Vanessa openly mocked my appearance. "Margaret, that hairstyle makes you look so matronly. Don't you want to look younger?" When my sister defended me, Vanessa told her to stay out of family business. Thomas began canceling our monthly business review meetings, claiming he was too busy, but later posting photos of weekend getaways on social media. When I tried to reschedule, Vanessa answered his phone saying, "Thomas doesn't need to check in with Mommy about every decision anymore." The final incident came the week before the wedding. During the rehearsal dinner, I overheard Vanessa in the restroom, talking to her maid of honor. "After tomorrow, we'll finally have access to the business accounts. 6 months max, and we sell everything. The old lady won't even know what hit her." When I confronted Thomas later that evening, he brushed it off. "You're being paranoid, Mom. Vanessa only wants what's best for all of us." That night, someone entered my bedroom while I slept. I woke briefly, groggy from my medication, to see a figure standing over me, but drifted back to sleep. The next morning, I found my medication had been moved, and my house keys were missing from my purse. That was the night before I woke up bald on my son's wedding day. The wedding venue was a historic mansion with gardens overlooking the harbor. Despite my humiliation, I arrived early, wearing a stylish headscarf that Janet had rushed out to buy me. Stephen and Robert positioned themselves strategically around the venue, ready to support me. The ceremony proceeded with all the elegance that $52,000 could buy. Thomas looked handsome in his tuxedo, though his eyes flickered nervously when he saw me. Vanessa was radiant in her designer gown, smiling confidently as she walked down the aisle. The reception began at 3 p.m. in the grand ballroom. 57 guests mingled, enjoying champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I sat quietly at my table, watching Vanessa work the room, laughing and accepting congratulations. At 4:30 p.m., the DJ announced it was time for family toasts. First Thomas's best man spoke, then Vanessa's father. Finally, the DJ called, and now a toast from the mother of the groom, Margaret Wilson. A hush fell over the room as I stood and made my way to the microphone. I removed my headscarf, revealing my bald head to audible gasps from the guests. For those wondering about my new look, I began calmly, I woke up this morning to find someone had shaved my head while I slept. There was a note. I held up the pink sticky note for all to see. Now you look your age. Better late than never. The room went deadly silent. Vanessa's smile froze on her face. I've spent my life building a business to secure my family's future. When Paul died, I promised to give Thomas everything he needed to succeed. My voice remained steady. Today was meant to be the day I signed over Wilson's hardware to Thomas and Vanessa as a wedding gift. I paused, looking directly at my son. But recent events have forced me to reconsider. I nodded to Stephen, who connected his laptop to the venue's projector. The screen displayed the document titled Wilson Assets Acquisition Strategy in Vanessa's handwriting. These are documents I found in my home yesterday, I continued. They detail a plan to take control of my business, sell it without my knowledge, and place me in assisted living against my will. Photographs of the evidence filled the screen one after another. The forged signatures, the sales agreement, the detailed notes about my medication schedule. Thomas, I addressed my son directly, did you know about this plan to resolve the Margaret situation? Thomas's face had gone pale. He stood, knocking over his champagne glass. Mom, this is a misunderstanding. Vanessa cut him off, grabbing his arm. Sit down, she hissed, then turned to the crowd with a forced laugh. Clearly Margaret is confused. Maybe it's time to consider memory care after all. That's when I played the recording from my purse. Vanessa's voice in the restroom, clear as day. After tomorrow, we'll finally have access to the business accounts. 6 months max, and we sell everything. The old lady won't even know what hit her. A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. Vanessa's parents exchanged horrified glances. Her father stood up abruptly. Is this true, Vanessa? He demanded. Vanessa's composure cracked. She's lying, she shouted, pointing at me. She's just a jealous old woman who can't let go of her precious son or her money. In that moment of raw anger, her true nature was visible to everyone. Thomas stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. The gift I plan to give today will not be given, I said firmly. And this evidence has already been provided to the district attorney's office for investigation of elder abuse and fraud. I turned to leave, but Thomas rushed toward me, grabbing my arm. Mom, please, I didn't know all of this. I swear. I looked at my son, the boy I'd raised, now a man I barely recognized. You stood by while she plotted against me. You let her isolate me, humiliate me, and violate me in my sleep. Even if you didn't plan it all, you chose to look away. I gently removed his hand from my arm. I hope someday you'll become the man I raised you to be. But today is not that day. As I walked out, Janet and Stephen beside me, the reception erupted into chaos behind us. Vanessa was screaming, guests were leaving in disgust, and Thomas stood alone at the head table, his perfect day in ruins. In the car, I finally let the tears come. Not from sadness, but from relief. The truth was out, and I was free. The Monday after the wedding, I met with Stephen and a team of financial advisors at his office. The wedding had been canceled mid-reception, with Vanessa's family leaving in disgust, and Thomas attempting to follow me home, only to find the locks changed. "We need to secure your assets immediately," Stephen advised, "and I think it's time to reveal the full extent of your financial situation." What Thomas and Vanessa never knew was that Wilson's hardware was only part of my holdings. While they plotted to take over my visible assets, they had no idea about my other investments. After Paul died, I learned never to keep all my eggs in one basket, I explained to the team. Stephen nodded, displaying a comprehensive financial portfolio on his screen. Beyond the hardware stores worth $1.8 million, I had quietly built a real estate portfolio worth $3.2 million, investing in commercial properties throughout New England. I owned 4 apartment buildings, 2 office complexes, and had significant investments in renewable energy companies worth another $2.4 million. Thomas and Vanessa were so focused on the hardware stores, they never bothered to investigate further, I said. They thought $1.8 million was my entire net worth. My total assets exceeded $7.5 million, far more than the struggling business owner they believed me to be. "I've lived modestly my whole life," I explained. "I wanted to build something that would benefit Thomas and any future grandchildren. I never imagined I'd need to protect it from them." My accountant, David, arrived with more documentation. "I've secured all accounts with additional verification measures," he assured me. "No one can access them without your explicit approval, verified through multiple channels." We spent hours restructuring my assets into ironclad trusts, with Janet and her children as beneficiaries. A small trust was established for Thomas that would only mature if he completed financial counseling and ethics training. "The district attorney wants to move forward with charges against Vanessa," Stephen informed me. "They believe they have enough evidence for elder abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud, and possibly breaking and entering regarding the hair incident." I sighed, feeling the weight of it all. "And Thomas?" "That's your decision," Stephen said gently. "There's evidence he was at least aware of parts of the plan, but it appears Vanessa was the primary architect." I thought of my son, misguided, weak perhaps, but still my child. "Let's focus on Vanessa for now. I need time to decide about Thomas." As we wrapped up the meeting, I felt a strange sense of empowerment. For years, I'd hidden my success to protect my son from feeling intimidated or inadequate. Now my financial independence would protect me from the very person I'd tried to shelter. 2 weeks after the wedding, a preliminary hearing was held regarding the charges against Vanessa. The courtroom was packed, not just with family and friends, but with several of my employees who had come to show support. Vanessa arrived with an expensive lawyer, her face a mask of confidence, until she saw the crowd. Her eyes narrowed when she spotted me in the front row, my head now covered with a soft fuzz of new growth. The district attorney presented the evidence, the documented plan to seize my assets, the forged signatures, the recording from the wedding, and photographs of my shaved head. Most damning were the email exchanges with Craig Parker about selling my business out from under me. "Your Honor," the DA said, "this was a calculated campaign to defraud Ms. Wilson of her life's work and isolate her from her support system." When Vanessa took the stand, she attempted to paint herself as the victim. Margaret never accepted me. She was possessive of Thomas and the business. I was just trying to help modernize an outdated company and secure their future. Her story crumbled under cross-examination when the DA presented evidence of her previous relationship with the elderly professor who had mysteriously changed his will in her favor before his death. The judge ruled there was sufficient evidence to proceed to trial and set bail at $100,000. As Vanessa was led away, her eyes locked with mine. There was no remorse there, only fury at being caught. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered. I had avoided publicity, but now stepped forward. This case isn't just about me, I stated clearly. Elder abuse and financial exploitation happen to thousands of seniors every year. If my story encourages even one person to seek help or recognize warning signs, then something good will come from this pain. My employees surrounded me protectively as we walked to waiting cars. Robert, my store manager, squeezed my hand. "We're all proud of you, Margaret. It took real courage to stand up like that." That evening, Thomas came to Janet's house where I was staying. He looked haggard, with dark circles under his eyes. "Mom," he began, voice breaking, "I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to know I never wanted to hurt you. I got caught up in Vanessa's confidence, her vision for the future. She made me believe you were holding us back." I studied my son's face, seeing both the man he'd become and the boy he once was. "Did you know she shaved my head?" He shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "I swear I didn't. When I saw you at the wedding, I was horrified." "But you knew about plans to take control of my business? To put me in a home?" He nodded miserably. "Not at first. By the time I realized how far it had gone, I felt trapped. Vanessa said if I didn't support her, she'd leave me. I was weak, Mom. I failed you completely." I didn't rush to comfort him. Some lessons must be learned the hard way. "You have a long journey ahead to rebuild trust, Thomas. It won't happen overnight." "I know," he whispered. "I'll do whatever it takes. Therapy, community service, working from the bottom up in the business if you'll let me." "We'll see," I said, neither promising forgiveness nor closing the door completely. Actions, not words, will determine what happens next. As he left, shoulders slumped in genuine remorse, I felt the first small stirring of hope that someday we might find a way back to each other. 1 year after the disastrous wedding day that changed everything, my life had transformed so completely that sometimes I barely recognized it, in the best possible way. The court case against Vanessa became a landmark in our state's judicial history. Local papers dubbed it the Wedding Day Betrayal, and it brought elder financial abuse into public consciousness like never before. Vanessa's high-priced attorney tried every tactic, painting me as a controlling mother, unwilling to let go of power, claiming Thomas had acted independently, even suggesting I had mental health issues that caused me to imagine conspiracies. The evidence, however, was irrefutable. Email records, the detailed asset acquisition plan, financial documents, witness testimonies, and most damning of all, Vanessa's own recorded words at the wedding reception. When the judge delivered her sentence, 18 months, with 10 suspended, she looked Vanessa directly in the eyes and said words I'll never forget. The systematic exploitation of elderly individuals by those they trust is among the most despicable forms of betrayal. You deliberately targeted a woman who should have been able to trust you as family. You manipulated her son against her. You violated her physical dignity by shaving her head while she slept. This court will not tolerate such calculated cruelty, especially when directed at our most vulnerable citizens. 3 different senior advocacy organizations approached me after the trial, asking me to share my story. What began as reluctant speaking engagements soon became a passion, standing before rooms of seniors and their families, warning them of the signs I had missed. "Trust your instinct," I would tell them. "If something feels wrong, it probably is, and never be too ashamed to ask for help." Thomas attended every hearing, sitting in the back row, head bowed in shame. Though not charged as an accomplice due to insufficient evidence of direct involvement in the planning, the public humiliation was its own punishment. His business connections evaporated overnight. Former friends crossed the street to avoid him. He moved from the luxury condo to a small apartment across town and took a job stocking shelves at a competitor's hardware store, the only place that would hire him. With the legal matters settled, I made strategic decisions about my future. I sold 2 of the hardware store locations to my longtime employees through a favorable financing arrangement that ensured they could succeed. James and Diane, who had worked for me for over 20 years, cried when I handed them the keys. "We'll make you proud, Margaret," James promised, his voice breaking. "You already have," I told them. "That's why I'm trusting you with my legacy." The flagship store I kept, working 3 days a week with Robert now serving as general manager. I renovated the office, creating a brighter, more modern space. The wooden desk where I'd spent countless hours calculating margins and reviewing inventory was replaced with a sleek glass table. No more hiding in the shadows. "You know," Robert commented one day, "this store hasn't just survived without Thomas. It's thriving. Profits are up 18% since you took back full control." I wasn't surprised. Fear of disappointing my son had made me second-guess my business instincts for years. Now I trusted myself again, implementing the modernization plans I'd hesitated on before. We launched an online ordering system, renovated the showroom, and partnered with local contractors to provide installation services. The business I had thought needed my son to survive was actually flourishing under my renewed confidence. With more free time, I finally pursued interests I'd set aside for decades. I joined a painting class at the community center, discovering a talent for watercolors that surprised even me. My first completed piece, a sunrise over the harbor, now hangs in the store entrance. When customers comment on it, I smile and say, "The artist is a 67-year-old woman who discovered she still had plenty to learn." I traveled to Italy for a cooking course in Tuscany, something Paul and I had always dreamed of doing together. In the evenings, sitting on a terrace, overlooking rolling vineyards, I felt Paul's presence beside me. "You'd love this," I whispered to the stars one night. "I'm living for both of us now." The chef, Marcella, noticed me sitting alone and joined me. "Your pasta today. It had heart," she said, in broken English. "In Italy, we say food made with love tastes different. Your hands, they know something about love." That night, I cried for the first time since the wedding day, not from grief or betrayal, but from the simple recognition of my own worth, from a stranger who saw me clearly. When I returned home, I didn't just bring recipes. I brought a newfound boldness. I renovated my kitchen, replacing the practical countertops with beautiful marble. I bought art for walls that had held the same landscapes for 30 years. I replaced the practical sedan I'd driven for a decade with a sporty red convertible that made Janet howl with laughter the first time I picked her up in it. "Margaret Wilson, you're having a renaissance," she declared as we drove along the coast, scarves whipping in the wind. Most importantly, I started a foundation dedicated to preventing elder financial abuse. Using $500,000 of my own money as seed funding, we provided education, legal resources, and emergency support to seniors in vulnerable positions. The Wilson Dignity Project quickly gained recognition throughout New England. I spoke at community centers, retirement homes, and even testified before the state legislature on strengthening elder protection laws. When I was victimized, I had resources to fight back, I told lawmakers during a hearing that was televised statewide. Most seniors don't. They lose everything and have no recourse. We owe them better protection. The room fell silent when I described waking up bald on my son's wedding day. Several legislators wiped away tears. When I finished speaking, the committee chairwoman, a woman in her 70s, stepped down from the dais to embrace me. The bill passed with bipartisan support, strengthening penalties for elder exploitation, and providing additional resources for investigation and prosecution. Governor Malden invited me to the signing ceremony, where I stood proudly as cameras flashed, my silver buzz cut growing into a stylish pixie that made me look years younger. The Margaret Wilson Law, they called it. My name, once known only in our local business community, now attached to legislation that would protect thousands of vulnerable seniors. The attention brought a flood of stories from others who had experienced similar betrayal. I received hundreds of letters, many handwritten in shaky script, sharing painful accounts of children, grandchildren, caregivers, and neighbors who had exploited trust and stolen life savings. "You gave me courage," wrote an 82-year-old woman from Portsmouth. "After seeing you on television, I finally told my daughter I know she's been taking my Social Security checks. Thank you for helping me find my voice." These letters transformed my pain into purpose. Each one reminded me that what had happened to me wasn't isolated. It was epidemic. And unlike many victims, I had the resources and platform to fight back. Thomas was working through his own redemption journey. After completing a court-mandated financial ethics course, he found a job at a building supply company. No nepotism, starting at entry level. He attended therapy weekly and volunteered teaching financial literacy to high school students. At first, I rejected his calls and returned his letters unopened. The wound was too fresh, the betrayal too deep. But after 3 months of consistent effort on his part, I agreed to meet at a public cafe. He looked different, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes, and a humility that had never been there before. He ordered black coffee and couldn't meet my eyes at first. "I don't expect forgiveness," were his first words. "I just want you to know that I'm trying to become someone worthy of being your son again." I listened more than I spoke that day, watching him struggle to explain how he had fallen under Vanessa's influence, how his own insecurities and sense of entitlement had made him vulnerable to her manipulation. "I convinced myself you owed me the business," he admitted, "that I deserved it for being your son. I never stopped to think about what you deserved after building everything from nothing." Our relationship remained fragile but healing. We met for coffee every other Sunday, neutral territory with clear boundaries. Slowly, I saw glimpses of the son I'd raised returning. "The other day, a customer tried to return something clearly used, hun," he told me during one meeting. "My manager wanted to make an exception, but I remembered how you always said integrity matters more than a single sale. I stood my ground." Small moments like these rebuilt my trust incrementally. When he received his 6-month sobriety chip, the stress had led him to drink heavily after the wedding disaster. He asked if I would come to the ceremony. I sat in the back row watching my son speak honestly about his failures and his commitment to change. "My rock bottom wasn't losing my fiancé or my reputation," he told the group, not knowing I was there until he spotted me midway through his speech. It was the moment I realized I had betrayed the one person who had never given up on me, my mother. Our eyes met across the room, and for the first time since the wedding day, I felt the wall around my heart soften slightly. As for Vanessa, she served 8 months in minimum security prison, followed by 5 years probation and community service. After her release, investigators discovered she had attempted a similar scheme in Arizona, targeting an elderly widower she had met online. This time, authorities were watching, and she was returned to prison to serve the remainder of her suspended sentence. Her parents had reached out to me with a heartfelt apology, explaining that they had no idea what their daughter had been planning. I believed them. The shock and horror on their faces at the wedding had been genuine. We met for lunch 6 months after the trial, where her father, a dignified man in his 70s, broke down in tears. "We raised her with everything," he said, bewildered. "How did she become someone who could do this?" I had no answer for them, only compassion for parents facing their own painful journey of reconciling the child they thought they knew with the person she had revealed herself to be. Janet and I became closer than ever. She'd moved into a cottage on my property, and we often joked about being the Golden Girls of Massachusetts. Each morning, we walked 3 miles together, rain or shine. On weekends, we hosted dinner parties for our expanding social circle, friends I'd reconnected with and new acquaintances who shared my interests. "You know," Janet said one evening as we cleaned up after hosting a fundraiser for the foundation, "I've never seen you this happy, not even before Paul died." I considered her observation. I think you're right. I spent so many years being what everyone needed me to be: the grieving widow, the struggling single mother, the self-sacrificing parent. Now I'm just Margaret, living on my terms. My hair grew back, short, stylish, and entirely silver. I wore it proudly as a reminder of survival. Several women at the foundation commented on how much they loved the look, and 2 had even copied it. What had been meant as humiliation had become a signature style. The local newspaper did a profile on the foundation and mentioned my iconic silver pixie cut as part of my personal brand. "You should have seen me before," I told the reporter with a laugh. "Bland Bob, sensible clothes, trying to blend in. Losing my hair taught me to stop hiding." The article featured a large photo of me standing in front of our new foundation headquarters, wearing a bright blue blazer that the old Margaret would have considered too bold. The headline read, "Margaret Wilson, Turning Personal Trauma into Public Good." I expanded my horizons in ways I'd never imagined. I took a ballroom dancing class, where I met Harold, a retired architect with a quick wit and kind eyes. We weren't romantic at first, but we enjoyed each other's company at cultural events and long conversations over coffee. After decades of putting everyone else first, I was learning that my happiness mattered too. 6 months into our friendship, Harold asked me to dinner at the harbor's most elegant restaurant. I wore a deep burgundy dress that made me feel both powerful and feminine. "Margaret," he said over dessert, "I need to tell you something. I admire you tremendously. Your courage, your resilience, your kindness, despite everything you've been through. I'd like to see if there might be something more between us than friendship." At 67, I found myself blushing like a schoolgirl. I reached across the table and took his hand. "I think I'd like that too," I said, surprising myself with how easily the words came. Our relationship developed slowly, with the wisdom of 2 people who had already lived full lives and knew the value of honesty and mutual respect. Harold never tried to insert himself into my business affairs or my foundation work. Instead, he became my most enthusiastic supporter, sitting in the front row at every speaking engagement, helping organize fundraisers, and understanding when work took priority over our plans. "You've found your calling," he told me one evening as we walked along the harbor. "That's a rare and beautiful thing at any age." The Wilson Dignity Project expanded beyond my wildest expectations. Within 18 months, we had helped over 120 seniors recover misappropriated assets totaling more than $5.8 million. We established a legal aid fund, a temporary housing program, and support groups for families healing from financial abuse. What had begun from my personal pain had grown into a lifeline for others. We created a rapid response team of volunteer attorneys, financial advisors, and social workers who could intervene quickly when cases of suspected elder abuse were reported. We published a guidebook for seniors on protecting their assets that was distributed through doctors' offices, senior centers, and libraries throughout the state. For the Foundation's one-year anniversary, we held a gala that raised over $350,000 in a single night. Standing at the podium looking out at the crowd, community leaders, politicians, donors, and most importantly, seniors we had helped, I felt a profound sense of purpose. 1 year ago, I was at my lowest point, I told them. Today, I stand before you as proof that our worst moments don't define us. What we do with them does. Thomas attended the gala, quietly helping the staff set up chairs and staying late to clean up. He didn't seek attention or recognition, just the opportunity to support the work that had arisen from his mistakes. When several Foundation board members questioned his presence, I surprised myself by defending him. "Everyone deserves the chance to make amends," I said. "Isn't that part of what we believe?" I rarely thought about that morning when I'd awakened bald anymore. The shock and humiliation had faded, replaced by gratitude for the awakening it prompted. If Vanessa hadn't revealed her true nature so dramatically, how much more might I have lost? Sometimes the most painful moments are actually saving us from worse fates. That Thanksgiving, 18 months after the wedding that wasn't, I hosted dinner at my home. Janet and Harold helped me cook, filling the kitchen with laughter and the aromas of sage butter and cranberries. Several friends from the Foundation came, along with James and Diane from the hardware store. As I was setting the table, the doorbell rang. It was Thomas, standing nervously on the porch, holding a bouquet of fall flowers and a bottle of sparkling cider instead of wine, respecting his sobriety journey. "I know I said I'd come," he said hesitantly, "but I wanted to make sure you still wanted me here." The old Margaret might have jumped at this olive branch, so eager to restore the relationship that she'd ignore her own boundaries. The new Margaret considered carefully. "I'd like that, Thomas. We're eating around 2. Relief washed over his face as he stepped inside, taking in the changes to the home he'd grown up in. New furniture, bright artwork, a sense of fresh energy everywhere. "It looks amazing, Mom," he said sincerely. "Like you." "Thanks, Mom," he said, his relief palpable. "And Mom, I'm proud of everything you've built, not just the business, but who you are. I'm sorry it took almost losing you to see that." After he joined the others in the living room, I took a moment alone in the hallway. I caught my reflection in the mirror, not the woman I had been before the wedding day, nor the shocked, bald woman I'd been that morning, but someone new entirely, someone stronger, wiser, and oddly enough, more youthful in spirit than I'd been in decades. Later, as we gathered around the table, I looked at the faces of those who truly cared for me. Janet, my rock; Harold, my unexpected new beginning; friends who valued me for myself; and Thomas, finding his way back to integrity. I realized that while I had lost what I thought was most important, I had gained something far more precious, a life that was authentically mine. After dinner, I walked through my home, not the house of a victim or an elderly woman to be dismissed, but the home of someone who had faced betrayal and emerged stronger. The photos on the walls had changed. Alongside old family pictures were new ones, me receiving the Governor's Award for Community Service, painting in Tuscany, breaking ground on the Foundation's new office building, dancing with Harold at the Foundation Gala. I'd recently updated my will. Thomas would inherit a portion of my estate, but only after completing a comprehensive financial ethics program and demonstrating 5 years of stable employment. The bulk would go to the Foundation, with Janet as executor. It wasn't punitive. It was prudent. Love didn't mean blind trust anymore. In the garden, The rose bushes Paul had planted 30 years ago were flourishing under my renewed care. Next to them, new varieties I'd selected were taking root. Like my life, the garden honored the past while embracing fresh growth. On my bedside table sat a framed quote I'd discovered during my recovery. Sometimes, the most beautiful growth comes after being cut to the ground. My hand instinctively moved to my hair, now a silver crown I wore with dignity. From devastation had come renewal, from betrayal had come wisdom, and from loss had come an unexpected rebirth. I thought about how different my life would have been if I'd simply handed over the business that wedding day as planned. I would have lost not just my financial security, but my chance at this rich, meaningful chapter of life. Sometimes what seems like our worst moment is actually the doorway to our best. The next morning I woke early as usual. Harold had stayed the night, and I smiled at his gentle snoring beside me. Another new joy I'd never anticipated. After my walk with Janet, I'd be meeting with a state senator about expanding our elder protection program statewide. In the afternoon, I had my painting class, and in the evening, a planning session for the Foundation's annual gala. My days were full, purposeful, and entirely my own. The morning of my son's wedding, I woke up bald, but today I stood tall, wholly myself, and finally free, not just from those who had tried to control me, but from my own fears of standing alone, making waves, and claiming my worth. At 67, I wasn't ending a chapter. I was writing the most exciting one yet. My life had been shaved down to the roots, but from that vulnerable, exposed place had grown something stronger and more beautiful than I could have imagined. And for that unexpected gift, I was profoundly grateful.